Hello everyone, hello from Ukraine. We are watching Channel 24. My name is Anastasia Zazulyak, and today our guest is Ben Hodges, who is retired United States Army officer who serves in commanding General United States Army in Europe. So nice to meet you.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be here.
Well, I would like to start from the most relevant events of the Ukrainian front. I'm talking about Kherson region. We are watching now how Russians moved their command from the right bank to the left bank of the Dnipro, and also capable command units. So instead, stubborn mobilized troops are transferred to Kherson, where the strength is to defend the city itself and direction in general. So how do you see the further development of the events in the Kherson region? And well, maybe I should remind that our intelligence is talking about that the fight for the Kherson can end till the end of November. So what do you think about that, and how do you see the development of situation here?
I think there are 3 or 4 critical points to address about Kherson. First of all, I have been impressed with the Ukrainian General Staff, the very methodical, professional way that they have gone about reducing Russian capabilities, continuing to squeeze Russian forces that are still on the right bank of the Dnipro, the destruction of the bridges that make it difficult for the Russians to reinforce or to pull out heavy equipment. So, and also the General Staff has resisted pushing troops into what would be a really, really bloody fight before it's time for it. So that's the first thing. The second thing, of course, your viewers already know this, but everybody in the world needs to be reminded constantly that Russia continues to kidnap and deport Ukrainian civilians and send them back to Russia somewhere. Of course, there's over 1 million we know that are already have been deported. Here's another 70,000 or maybe even 100,000 Ukrainians that have been deported out of Kherson. We cannot lose track of that. Number 3, it looks to me that Russians are preparing a defense on both sides of the river. That's part of the reason they got the civilians out, to clear the way, if you will. But interestingly, it looks like, I don't know this for sure, but it looks like they are replacing their better soldiers, the airborne who have been there the longest, with these newly mobilized troops as cannon fodder. And then they're building a new line on the left bank of the Dnipro, where they'll have a better defensive position. So the Russians are not stupid in this. And then finally, of course, once Ukrainian forces do secure all of Kherson and the right bank of the Dnipro, they will be able to bring up HIMARS and other capabilities that could then pound Russian defenses, Russian logistics that are much closer to Crimea. So this will be a good thing, but we still have to get across the river ourselves. And so this is something, obviously, the General Staff knows this, and I think that they'll be very clever, as they have been, on how this next phase unfolds.
Well, and what do you think? Are Russians preparing a trap for the armed forces, and either scenario of street battle in the city are beneficial for them? What do you think about that?
Well, of course, the General Staff and the local Ukrainian commanders are very aware of that possibility. I mean, I continue to be impressed with how the General Staff has been conducting operations, and they will do everything they can to minimize the risk to their soldiers, to minimize the loss of life, and I think also they don't want to turn Kherson into Mariupol, where everything is destroyed. And so I think the Russians would love to do that, to have a big fight there that destroys everything about Kherson. And so I trust the judgment of the General Staff and Ukrainian commanders that they will be smart about how they do this next step.
Well, we all understand that the loss of Kherson will be very painful for Russians, and we can expect anything from them because of that. So our intelligence predicts that Russians may use even units withdraw from the Kherson region to the Zaporizhia, or even transfer them to Belarus to form a strike force. So what will Russians do after we liberate Kherson, and could this plan push Putin to involve openly Belarus to this war?
Well, first of all, Belarus is not going to enter this war. They have nothing that they can do. The 10 BTGs that they have are even worse capability, less professional than the Russian units that Ukrainians have been destroying. So perhaps Russia may try to open a new front from Belarus with their own forces. But again, these would be these recently mobilized troops, not some kind of real capable force. The general staff is aware of this possibility, but I'm not convinced yet that something significant, a real threat, could emerge from Belarus. And I think that Lukashenko knows that, he's doing what he has to retain some flexibility, some independence. But I believe he knows that if he does send his troops in there, that he will be dealing with an uprising inside Belarus. I don't think the people of Belarus have any desire to fight against Ukraine or Ukrainian forces.
Well, and what will be the consequences if, for Ukraine, if Russia, not Belarus, open a second front from the Belarus? For example, maybe they can attack again Kyiv, or maybe they can go to the western parts of Ukraine. So, in your opinion, are these scenarios possible, and do they have any chances for some success if we take into account the 8-month preparation of Ukrainian armed forces at the front line?
In war, all things are possible. But again, I just think it's very unlikely that anything significant could emerge from Belarus other than, if they continue to allow Russians to launch missiles and airstrikes out of there, or drones, but a major ground offensive. And of course, we'll see it. I mean, you've got not only Ukrainian intelligence, but U.S., British, others are watching. So it would not be a big surprise if they began to pull something together. So I just think that that's very unlikely. What I think is happening is that the Ukrainian counteroffensive that started in September. Think of all of these actions as one event with a right wing. The right wing is in Kherson. The left wing is coming down towards Mariupol. And eventually, all of these will converge on Crimea. I mean, Crimea is the prize. And I believe that Crimea will be liberated by next summer. And so between now and then, Ukrainian forces are going to continue to destroy and push back Russian forces, continue to destroy Russian logistics. The Russian Navy is going to continue to hide around Crimea because they are terrified of getting anywhere close to Ukrainian drones or Ukrainian anti-ship missiles, and Ukraine doesn't even have a navy. I mean, that tells you how bad things are for the Russians. And so I think this is what lies ahead. And of course, critical to this is that the U.S. and the Brits and the Germans and others need to continue providing capabilities that Ukraine needs.
Well, let's talk about our sad reality, recent missile attacks that we experience in Ukraine every day, unfortunately. Well, why do you think Russia's army has focused on massive strikes in recent weeks on the civilian infrastructure and not on the military targets? And do you think that maybe West should react more harshly to such open terrorist activity, and especially after the news that Tehran will give new portion of missiles, rockets to Russia?
So I think that increasingly the West recognizes that what Russia is doing, and is talking about it openly, that what Russia is doing, attacking civilian targets, civilian infrastructure, these are war crimes, and that they will be held accountable. Now, right now, Russia doesn't care about that, but they will be held accountable. Secondly, the reason that they're going after the power infrastructure specifically is to try and make Ukrainian cities uninhabitable or less inhabitable during wintertime, so that then hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian refugees will be forced to go to Europe, to Western Europe. And this is all the intention of the Kremlin, is what we call the weaponization of refugees, to send hundreds of thousands of people into Poland and Germany and all over Europe, so that those governments would want to put pressure back on Kyiv to agree to negotiate in order to stop all this. Now, it's going to fail because, first of all, the Ukrainian people are not going to give in to this, and President Zelensky is not going to give in to this. And also, I'm confident that Poland and Germany and other countries also realize what's going on, and that they are not going to put pressure on Kyiv to give in to this. So Russia's attempt, because they can't do anything else. I mean, they have nothing else they can do. They are losing in every facet of this conflict other than killing innocent people. So that's what they're doing right now. But that's not a war-winning strategy for them.
Well, can the EU and USA really prevent Putin from using weapons of mass destruction, Ukraine nuclear weapon? And what should be the reaction of the West in case of doing this terrible thing?
Well, my president has already said that if Russia makes the terrible miscalculation of using a nuclear weapon, that there will be catastrophic consequences for Russia. Catastrophic. I believe him. I think the Russian general staff believes him. And I think that they know that there are zero positive outcomes for Russia if they use a nuclear weapon. It gives them no battlefield advantage, only negative outcomes, because then the West, led by the United States, will have to respond. So really, the more that people talk about these nuclear weapons and express how worried they are, that's exactly what the Kremlin wants. Their nuclear weapons really are only effective as long as they do not use them. The minute they use them, they are no longer effective, because then the U.S. is going to be in the fight directly, and they're going to crush large parts of Russian capabilities. I think the General Staff knows this, and that's why I don't believe that they will, that the Kremlin will actually go through with it. And of course, as I'm sure you know, today, President Xi, while hosting Chancellor Scholz, said that he disapproves of Russia using nuclear weapons, but also he disapproves of them threatening to use nuclear weapons. So Russia has no friends in this. Maybe North Korea, but they have no friends when it comes to the idea of using a nuclear weapon against Ukraine.
Well, of course, a lot of countries, all the world is helping Ukraine to win this war and everything else. And of course, we really appreciate it. And USA are doing so much for that. Well, but does the West, and particularly the politicians of USA, understand that it is cheaper to help Ukraine to win Russia than to let Putin win and face his aggression in other countries? What do you think?
Well, I think the vast majority of U.S. politicians, the U.S. Congress, they understand that. That's why you have over 70% of Americans favor continuing to give support to Ukraine. And by the way, over 70% of Germans are in favor of giving more support to Ukraine. The Congress, of course, you know, and your listeners know that we have our own midterm elections coming up next week. And there will be some people who will question, why are we doing all this? And it's not inappropriate for the Congress to put pressure on the administration to explain what is the outcome, what is the objective. But it's clear to me that the vast majority of the Congress supports this based on how much money it continues to be provided in a bipartisan way. And I think also when the president explains why this is important, not just for Ukraine, but it's important for security and stability in Europe, which is important for our economic prosperity, as well as not having a NATO conflict where we would have to respond, and also because the Chinese are watching. And the Chinese, if they see that we can't stick together against Russia, then I think they will feel emboldened to do what they want to do in the Pacific. So these are the kind of things I think that make sense to most politicians.
Well, recently, despite the Pentagon's official denials, publications has appeared in different European press in America about that weapon supplies by the West to Ukraine may be resold by Ukrainian armed forces to third party. Well, in your opinion, is that really the fear of our partners, or maybe just an information operation by Kremlin made at disrupting military aid from Europe and US?
First of all, any time that the United States provides equipment, weapons, technologies to other countries, the law requires accountability of everything. And so I'm not worried about this at all. First of all, I think Ukraine is using everything that they get in the best way possible. I mean, and this to me is not a valid report that weapons are being resold or that's not in any large scale way. I think people are sensitive because we lost so much equipment in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so it's logical that people would want to make sure that there was proper accountability. So I don't lose any sleep over this.
Well, war in winter, there are a lot of discussions about how everything will be going on, and a lot of people are worried about how the war will be in winter. So what do you personally think about it, and how do you rate it? Can winter slow down the counter-offense of Ukrainian army forces? And what should we expect from the nearest future in winter?
So I would really hate to be a brand new Russian private just mobilized, arriving somewhere down in southern Ukraine, because number one, I don't want to be there. Number two, I will not have proper equipment. Number three, I'll be showing up just in time to sit in a trench that's half full of water, surrounded by other people who don't want to be there, and knowing that Ukrainian forces are on the move coming towards me. That's a bad situation to be in. And also knowing that my chain of command does not care about me and will not do what's necessary to make sure I have everything I need. Whereas for Ukrainian forces, who are dealing with the same conditions, are much better equipped and have 50 other nations providing capabilities, and they have the entire 90% of the geography of Ukraine behind me providing what I need, and I'm on the attack. So I think Ukrainians have the advantage here. Of course, the ground, as you probably know, the soil in that part of Ukraine, when it gets wet, is nasty, very difficult for walking and for wheeled vehicles. So yes, things will slow down compared to how it was in September. But I believe that the General Staff will continue to keep the pressure. They do not want to give the Russians a chance to strengthen their defenses or to make better preparations with all these newly mobilized soldiers. And they will figure out how to deal with it. At the end of the day, for a soldier to survive and be effective in nasty, wet, cold weather, it requires discipline. It requires sergeants who make them do the right things, to change their socks, to dry out their equipment, to take care of themselves, to do the things so that you don't become sick or weakened by the cold weather. It requires management, get people back so they can get out of the cold for a little bit of time, something hot to eat, drink. We know this from thousands of years of history. Ukrainians will have figured out how to do that. The Russians will not have the logistics necessary to do that properly. So Ukrainian soldiers will fare much better in these bad winter conditions. But yes, it will slow things down. And probably visibility will be decreased because of bad weather. So for some of the drones that rely just on optics that don't have thermal imagery, they may be less effective.
Well, Putin's cook Prigozhin formed a real separate army in Russia named after Wagner. And as we know, at the beginning, this army was considered very professional and dangerous. But things have changed now, and as our intelligence said, they take to this army ill people and different prisoners. So that's why they are not the same as it was in the beginning. So. Also, we know that there are a lot of these people from this army at the very hot positions at the front line, for example, in the Bakhmut and the Donetsk region. So how do you personally evaluate this army named after Wagner, and what can they significantly affect the course of the war right now?
So I personally overestimated Russian capabilities at the beginning of the war. I failed to realize the depth of corruption and how much negative impact that would have on Russian capabilities. I didn't realize how little experience they actually had until we started seeing things. And of course, I always knew that they did not have sergeants. But I did not realize they would be so poorly trained and ready to fight. So that's why you have something like Wagner Group that has lots of experience, that has been in Africa and Syria as well as around Ukraine. But the one time that Wagner Group ran into American forces in Syria a couple of years ago, they were destroyed. So that tells you, they may be the best of the Russians, but they're nowhere close to American or the best Ukrainian forces. So I think that you're going to see when Wagner has to go to prisons to get people to join. I mean, that tells you something else about the human dimension of Wagner. What's more interesting to me about Wagner mercenaries is that this is, in my view, Prigozhin creating his own army for himself, just like Kadyrov and the Chechens that are fighting on the Russian side. Not many Chechens actually get into the fighting. Kadyrov is protecting them. I mean, I saw the report yesterday where they are the back line behind Russian to make sure that the Russians don't retreat or leave or surrender. But they're not the ones in there getting crushed. So Kadyrov and Prigozhin, it seems to me, are preparing themselves for when the Federation comes apart, so that they will have their own army. And I'm sure that Prigozhin and Kadyrov are not taking their orders from General Gerasimov or from Shoigu. So what we have is a Russian force that is not coherent or cohesive, that is not able to fight with Air Force, land forces, special forces, and the Navy, so which is a good thing for Ukraine.
Well, as to the Prigozhin as himself, Putin's cook, he's one of the people who can afford to criticize Russia's military leadership. So it doesn't mean that he's maybe shaping himself to the path of Putin's successor, and maybe he wanted to become a new president or something like that. So, or maybe we shouldn't pay so much attention to him. What do you think?
Of course, I don't know what his personal aspirations are, but I think that people are beginning to recognize that Russian forces are losing, that they're going to be defeated, and they're going to have to leave, whether it's with Putin or not. And that, as Dr. Timothy Snyder said a couple of weeks ago, yes, it's bad to lose in Ukraine, but it's much worse to lose in Russia. And so I think these different groups inside Russia are beginning to think about how they prepare, how they protect themselves, and how do they get in position to take power if there is a change of some sort.
Well, in my short two last questions, first of all, of course, we know that this war will end with the Ukraine victory because we have a help a lot of partners and our soldiers liberate every land every day. But how everything can end to Russia? What can happen to Russia after Ukraine have this victory?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think you'll see. People should begin to prepare for the possibility. I'm not advocating this, but there is the possibility of a breakup of the Russian Federation, that we may be seeing the beginning of that. And places like Chechnya and Dagestan and other ethnic regions see that now that the Russian military has been exposed, that they will feel that this might be their chance to break away. And so who knows? But we will be concerned about where all these nuclear weapons are, and there'll be refugees. These are things to consider.
Well, and I can't help that finish our meeting with this question of your own focus. When will armed forces be able to have this victory? Maybe when can we have our borders till February 23, or generally the state borders of Ukraine, including Crimea? And what does it depends on?
Well, I believe that Crimea will have been liberated by next summer of 23. And that would also include all of Donetsk and Luhansk and Zaporizhia. I mean, all of it would have been returned to Ukrainian sovereignty. That's my belief.
Thank you so much for our interview. I hope that our meeting will be very interesting for our readers and for people who will watch us. And I remember that we talked with Ben Hodges, who is retired United States Army officer who serves as Commanding General United States Army in Europe. So thank you so much. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!